Hi, this is Ken Adams, and welcome to this special election edition of the Valley View. And joining me this week is Paul Evans, who's a candidate for the House District 20. And that is, can you kind of describe that district to us?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for having me back on.
Sure thing.
House District 20 is West Salem, Monmouth Independence, and parts of South Salem. And the Willamette River runs right through it.
Well, you know, I'd like to kind of limit how many topics we talk about.
Sounds good.
And so one of the things I think that is important, and I've seen some articles recently in the Statesman Journal talking about free tuition for some community college students, and also there's the pay forward for college students. And I think this is a good way to go, but I'd like to hear your view about not just that, but education in general for the state of Oregon.
Sure, that's a great topic. It's actually one of the reasons I'm running. In the news right now, there's several different topics. One has to do with a ballot measure that's currently on that would provide the ability of the state to allow certain bonding activities to provide enough capital for educational opportunity grants. Treasurer Wheeler has been behind that. I say that because it's actually linked to some of the alternative options for the pay-it-forward model, as well as, quite frankly, some of the longer-term visions of how we're going to try to make education more affordable in the state of Oregon. The making community college free, I think, long-term is the right strategy. It goes back to the roots of what community colleges were supposed to be. They were supposed to be a place where not just people interested in getting new skills and new talents and new opportunities for the workplace, but also citizens that may be interested in learning a little bit of German, or interested in just learning about different types of activities, or maybe learning in conflict management. The whole idea of community colleges in an environment of a democratic republic was designed to make access to education, access to workforce training a lifelong opportunity. So making it more affordable, I think, is the right plan. There are some issues that I think need to be resolved, one of which has to do with accreditation and credit to make sure that as we seek to make community colleges and higher education more affordable and more available, we don't take the shortcuts and just simply wave a flag and say certain classes that are taught currently in high school are automatically college credit worthy. And I think that there are some discussions about that. But overall, I'm very excited about this idea of the pay-it-forward model, where people basically are given opportunity up front, and with an understanding that shared sacrifice, the individual as well as the state, we're not trying to get people out of having to actually pay for the opportunity provided, but make sure that it's affordable. It fits very much in line with something I proposed actually in '06 called Social Security in Reverse, where you could contract with the state or with credit unions if they were a part of the network, and basically get as much education opportunity you wanted up front with a percentage of your gross income over the course of your working career, so that you could make sure that the next person in line had the same opportunities.
Right, because it's about community.
It's absolutely.
You know, and as we get a better educated workforce, we're much more competitive.
Right.
You know, worldwide.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of times employers are not just looking for cheap employees, they're looking for people that have skills.
That's right.
And college helps provide that. And I think the community colleges actually sometimes are very good at providing targeted skills.
There's a book, it was very popular about 10, 15 years ago, called Prosperity, that actually talks about, and in many ways it's one of the foundational works in the understanding of how we can transform America through transforming the community college. And one of the things that is most exciting to me is we're just now beginning to have the conversation that you just alluded to, that the education isn't simply giving Bob or Jane their education. That's part of it, but it's actually investing in them means investing in the community as a whole, and that over the long term we can make a choice, and I think it's really one of the other. We can choose to try to be like a lot of other countries around the world, where we try to invest as little as we can get away with and accept cheap labor and accept not so good environment and accept basically being at the will of corporations roaming the world for cheaper labor. Or we can say, you know what, in Oregon, we're going to do it different. We're going to actually build a vision where we are the innovative, creative place that businesses fight to come to, because we invest in our workers, we invest in our environment, We help small businesses grow. We actually make it easy to take an idea through the patent process. We make it easy to get people's ideas into development and become that synergy that actually fuses ideas and opportunities and workforce for the 21st century. That's the vision I'm running to try to be a part of. I reject what I think a lot of the other world is going to go to, and quite frankly, my argument is this: if you want cheap labor, go somewhere else. If you want a product that's not only going to be good now, but you want innovation for the next generation of products, come to Oregon. That's what we want to help build.
And that's coupled with jobs.
Absolutely.
Because we have to make sure that we have good jobs here in Oregon for those that we educate.
That's right.
We can't just be educating kids with all these skills and then have them go someplace else. So
That's right.
they really need to kind of work together. And
right.
so how would you kind of ensure that
Sure.
good jobs come here to Oregon?
And you know, when you talk about jobs, there's the reality, and then there's where we want to go.
Right.
And current reality is this. Current reality is that more people than we wish, I believe up to 25% actually qualify for Medicaid. We have unemployment in the 6-7% category, which really, if you look at true unemployment, it's closer to 11 or 12% because unemployment only measures those currently looking for a job. All of those things in place, when you look at jobs, right now of minimum wage earners, for example, 2/3 are women. It's an interesting world we're living in. It is a time of transition. Now, having said that, this is my point. With jobs, we have a choice again to make. We can either continue, like most other states, to try to go out and recruit big employers and often give tax credits and other types of goodies to get them here, or we can invest in basically farming. People call it either the hunting or the gathering or the farming method, and basically invest in jobs and in people here. So here's my strategy. First, I have a working definition of what a small business is. One definition, which is generally understood throughout the state, is 100 employees or less is seen as a small business. Most people wouldn't argue with that. I have a second, in addition to that definition. If you're a company and you have 50% of your employees living in the state of Oregon, I'm going to call you a small business. So if you're Nike and you have 50% of your employees, I would actually call you a small business. Now, we both know they only have about 7% of their employees currently living in the country, or in the state. But trying to create a rubric that actually incentivizes folks that want to identify themselves as small, local Oregon businesses. We shower them with tax credits, we shower them with the opportunities, we shower them with partnerships. We certainly do what we need to do to keep the employers while we're in transition, the Nikes, the Intels, and others. But we basically focus on helping local small businesses. Again, those two definitions. And corporations that are bigger than 100, they can opt in by having 50% of their employees here. And we basically work with those small businesses to provide capital to expand, to provide workforce training based on a regional basis, by having the businesses themselves involved in the discussions of what workforce skills and apprenticeships we're providing. I believe that Oregon's best days are ahead if we recognize that our greatest asset, in addition to the natural wonder of our place, is actually maximizing the potential of our people. I think for too long we've bought off on this idea that we have to compete with everybody else and chase down the rabbit. I'm not up for that. I want to grow the garden here. I want to make Eden the place where innovation and creativity rule, and that's through small business development. And that actually right now means more capital. It means branding across the sea to make sure that Oregon products are sold because they're representing healthy lifestyles and good clean water and good beautiful skies. I think that really is the direction we need to go, and I hope to help facilitate it.
And we want companies to see Oregon as a place that they want to locate to because, A, we have good employees and well-skilled people, and it's attractive to people that maybe live in other parts of the world to come here because it is a beautiful place to live.
That's right.
And so those are kind of interrelated. But also, what about the elementary and high school levels? Because that's part of the education system, and sometimes Oregon gets a bad reputation.
We you know, depending on which number you look at, we're either 46th or 47th on certain quantitative methods. I think that when you're looking at the K through 12 system, there's a couple of different particular things that we should keep in mind. Number one, we do have a larger than average transient population. And I emphasize that because when you look at dropout rates, folks that are in education know that the 8th and 9th grade are critical years. And some states don't have as much flux between 8th and 9th as we do. 8th and ninth is often when, if it's a family that migrates for crops or farm or agricultural activities or timber activities, that's when young male children actually leave school and actually go into the workforce, start working. So that's a little bit of an asterisk that I think people need to understand. The second thing is, when you're looking at the K-12 system, I actually believe that we've been overrun with what I like to call the packaged education in a box reforms. First we had No Child Left Behind. Then we had Race to the Top. Now we have Common Core. And again, I'm not trying to take anything away from the ideas or the academic rigor or the curricula involved. What I am talking about is that in Oregon, I think, because most people live day to day without a direct connection to the schools, that we need to do a better job of communicating what it is we do in the schools. And here's what I mean by that. Families are smaller than they used to be. Many people are living longer than they did before without kids in the family, in the house at that point. And a lot of folks that I wish weren't, but they currently are, a lot of good parents, for all the right reasons, are taking their kids out of public school and sending them to private school or other alternatives because they want to make sure that their kids end up with the best education possible. What that means is fewer and fewer people have a direct connection to the public school, which was supposed to be the town hall. It was supposed to be the place where people learn not only how to get along with each other, not only how to read, write, and arithmetic, but also how to solve problems, and also how to connect with each other in a sense of community, and more importantly, how to be a good citizen, how to serve that civic life. So my approach is, let's put the curriculum discussions on the shelf for a little bit, because they have a lot of work to be done by the professionals. And let's focus on smaller class sizes. Let's focus on something called the quality education model. +3 is what I talk about. If you look in the 1990s, and I ask anybody that's watching today, Google it or Dogpile it or whatever the thing is now, go look it up. And the quality education model basically was an approach that said, all right, what is an elementary school? What is a middle school? What is a high school? What is the best ratio in a science class? What is the best ratio in a first grade class? How many music teachers should there be? How many school nurses should there be? And what I'd like to do is have a discussion, a rigorous discussion about updating the quality education model for the 21st century, and then put 3% on top of the baseline level for local and regional workforce development and apprenticeships. So that instead of fighting over whether or not they can afford vocational education, we actually have that as an add-on package to play to the strengths of the region. Once people understand that their kids have good contact time with their teachers, once they understand in their mind, wow, a class of 32 people, boy, that's a lot to teach. I use this model because in the military, when you look at let's just say a fighter squadron, for example, I know how many jets, how many engines, how many mechanics, and if there's a report that comes in that says, Major Evans, this right here, this fighter squadron is at 58%, well, I know what that means because I know what the baseline is.
Right.
Today in Oregon, depending on which school district you go to, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, they could be all over the place in terms of class size, all over the place in terms of contact time. So I think we have to refill the public trust when it comes to the K-12 system by taking a breath away from the curriculum discussions and actually look at the classroom again and rebuild it from the bottom up.
Yeah, I guess with my kids too, what I was seeing, because they were growing up basically in the 90s, was there was a lot of emphasis put on standardized testing.
That's right.
And they were spending, in my view, way too much time in the classroom teaching to the test.
Right.
And it aggravated me. And I know that the school district that I was in wasn't very happy when I told them that my kids would not be taking their standardized tests because I just felt like they were putting too much emphasis on it. And that's not really an education.
Right.
I mean, a measurement by test is one thing, but what they were doing was spending all their time trying to make those numbers look good.
Here's two ironies that I want to emphasize. The Chinese, People's Republic of China right now, are spending billions of dollars trying to figure out an education system to do what? To think creatively and innovatively, which Americans have always done because of our education system. So ironically, the fastest growing economy in the world, theoretically the most powerful on-the-way superpower, is actually trying to figure out how to do what we used to do at the time that we're trying to become more standardized like other countries. So my argument is right in line with yours. And on top of that, since Measure 5 kicked in the 1990s, we not only have tried to teach the test because it's something that people could throw Jell-O on the wall and say, well, at least we can track that.
Right.
But at the same time, you look at classes today, fewer school nurses, fewer school counselors. We have teachers teaching classes of 35, 36 with several kids with special needs. We have secretaries, administrative assistants providing drugs to kids because there's not a nurse in the building. We've gotten away from some of the basics that, to me, represent the holistic approach to education that made America great in the first place.
Well, a lot of times they don't have library services.
Right.
And I mean, they'll have a library with books in it, but nobody to help the kids
Right.
figure out what books they would like to read, and help guide them a little bit about, well, what are you interested in? This is where you need to look.
That's right. And I go back to, and we were talking about this before, it is time in Oregon right now for a John Kennedy moment. We're going to go to the moon. And then he let the scientists figure it out. It's time that we say right here in this election, we're done. We're done chasing our tail. We're done trying to do good enough. We want an education system that is the premier in the world. We will find a way to build it, and we will hold those accountable to make sure it actually happens. And it isn't about Common Core. It isn't about the latest educational industrial complex idea. It's about time with qualified teachers and students and investment of the community in jobs that are related to the training that they got, and an emphasis by every single Oregonian that at the end of the day, the public school isn't about those kids in the school, it's about the future of Oregon, and that we are all responsible for making sure that the next generation and the generation after that and the generation after that have it better than we do.
And I understand where you're coming from, because I know when my kids were in school, I saw a report that said that only 24% of the voters had kids in school.
Right.
And so it made it very difficult to pass bond measures,
right,
or try to do things that maybe needed more money, because a lot of people said, well, I don't have any kids in school. But the thing is that those kids are your future. And it's like my daughter used to like to point out, Dad, I get to pick out your retirement home.
That's right.
Right. And you want it well staffed.
Right.
With people that are qualified.
And the thing that makes me most frustrated, and this is another piece of legislation, if I get the chance to from given the opportunity to serve, it is time we get civics back in the schools.
Yes.
We want to say we're a democracy. We want to say we're an informed, educated republic. I fault the systems and structures that say it's more important to teach English and writing and math, which are important subjects,
right,
but it's more important to test those things than the civics aspect, because every 2 years we spend millions and millions of dollars trying to educate folks about how things work, where if instead we said, time out, part of school is teaching people to be good citizens, they can make their decisions at that point. They understand how the functions work, and they can go left or right or in the middle, it doesn't matter, but at least they know and they have that background. Right now, we're graduating folks that do not know that police officers are paid with property taxes. They do not know that there's such a thing as a sales tax in other states. They do not know how the federal and the state income tax work together. It's very frustrating, because at the end of the day, if we don't do this, we will cease to be the democracy that we can be.
And I think a lot of times those kids need those.
That's right.
And I don't always like to use personal experience, but I remember one time I was working in an office at a school as a volunteer, and they had to pull the teacher out of a history class for some issue, and they asked me to go sit in the class and just babysit the kids, right? Well, one of the kids started asking me questions about what was going on campus, and it was kind of, and so I started answering them. And we were having this conversation, and the kids really got into it. The teacher comes back, he just sat in the back and listened to us, because the kids were participating in the classroom. And I think that's something that's quite often missing in a lot of classrooms, that the kids aren't actually participating, they're being lectured to, and they're not they're not feeling invested in it, because no one's listening to them.
And the other part of education, one of the reasons I love being a teacher, and one of the reasons over the last 20 years I've been in and out of the classroom, except for when I had to go fight wars, is you have those moments where, whatever the lesson plan may be, and again, those lessons are important, you have aha moments where people, because of the exchange of ideas at that instant, and in this case, with somebody like yourself who has out-of-class experiences in addition to in-class experiences, people are enabled and empowered to have conversations and learn in a way that they weren't before. And that's one of the reasons I really emphasize, and again, want to work on this issue if I get elected, finding ways to help folks that want to volunteer make it easier to volunteer. Incentives around some property taxes, incentives around certain types of grants, incentives around some other things, so that people can actually buy their time to be in the classroom, providing that contact time, that intergenerational perspective, that out-of-state experience, so that at the end of the day, we are creating the most resilient, most articulate, most creative, most innovative students in America, if not in the world. But we have to have that vision going in, or we'll never get there.
And we have to know what it looks like.
That's right.
So one of the other topics that I like to discuss
Sure.
is the environment. And basically when I talk about environment, I want to talk about the big issue, and that's what we call climate change or global warming. And we've been relying on fossil fuels for well over 100 years, and
Yep.
now we're kind of suffering the consequences. And to me, it's how do we transition out of using those fossil fuels that put a lot of carbon and methane into the atmosphere that create a warmer climate? How do we transition out of that? And I'd like to hear your view on that, or do you consider that a top issue environmentally?
Well, I do. I mean, I think that, again, those that deny climate change, especially those that deny climate change because of faith, misunderstand faith. And I say that, and I hope not to offend, but as a person of faith, I believe that we were created by a God that gave us the ability to reason. Now, we don't always follow that reason, but nonetheless, we have the
Sometimes
ability
we
to
respond more to emotion.
That's right. So I believe that climate change is happening. I absolutely believe if in Genesis God was given dominion over the world, that means we could screw it up just as well as we could make it better. And I think right now we're screwing it up. And
Well,
I think it's time
that,
to help it.
yeah, I like to think of it as more as stewardship, not
That's
dominion.
the way it's supposed to be. Right. No, that's exactly how it's supposed to be. And unfortunately, we sometimes misunderstand and put man at the top of the pyramid instead of man in balance. And we can't sustain the way in which we're operating today, the way in which we conduct normal routine life is unsustainable. We have to be more ready to try to make some short-term and long-term investments in alternative energies. We won't be able to get where we want to go overnight. I mean, that's just the way it is. However, there are some things I think we can do that I'm excited about, and some of which haven't even really been talked about, and I'll give you an example. One of the unanticipated consequences, I think, of the upcoming decision on marijuana is that hemp might actually be put back into large-scale use and production again. Hemp is one of those environmentally friendly products. And again, I've never had marijuana, I've never smoked it, never done anything. But I'm excited about hemp because from what I understand before it was outlawed, it actually had some key to sustainability and durability and other things, uses less water, all those types of things. So I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about trying to figure out ways that we can meet our energy demands for the future. But we have to do it in a way that recognizes that time is a ticking. And unfortunately, one of the things that is pretty consistent throughout human history is that we only do things when we think we have to.
When we're forced to.
When we're forced to. And I'm looking forward to helping to facilitate, at least at the state and local level, some pilot projects, some opportunities for education and training and federal grants. I'm looking forward to trying to push infrastructure development in some sustainable ways because of the seismic concerns that we have and the resiliency grants that may be available. I'm looking at some of the wave energy. I'm looking at some of the wind energy. I'm excited about the idea of long-term being energy independent and potentially even a surplus power to send to other countries. I'm committed to that agenda. I want to make sure it doesn't cut off our nose, spite our face, but I think time is running out and we have to be serious about it.
Well, you know, you mentioned marijuana, and I was very interested in soil conservation when I was young, mostly because I lived my young years in Oklahoma and Kansas, and there were still a lot of huge dust storms.
Oh, the scars, yeah.
And hemp was considered a very good stabilizer for creeks.
Yeah.
You know, creek beds, you know, it has a nice deep root system and can hold the bank in place a lot better than a lot of other items. And so, you know, and this I found in an old book on soil conservation, and I thought, wow, that's interesting because
For
now
clothing,
you can't do it. For clothing?
For clothing, it's much more durable, which means potentially we would be harvesting fewer alternatives and theoretically producing better quality that lasts longer, that are better value. I mean, there's oils that may be coming out of it that actually could be non-polluting in the way that they're made. There's a number of different things that I think warrant excitement about it. And again, that's just one issue.
Right.
But we have to, again, going back to the Kennedy discussion, we have to have the vision first. If we just continue to try to stumble, then we'll have some problems. And I actually credit Governor Kulongoski. You know, when I worked for him, he was more than a boss. He was actually somebody I really looked up to. And though his approach, some of the systems and protocols that came out of the Betsy and everything else had some problems with it, I think it was the right vision. And you need to make sure and incentivize corporate interests to recognize that in addition to the profit value, the innovation value is at least as important. And the potential doorway to long-term profitability is there, but we need to change some ways we do things, and we need to be more focused on that.
You know, speaking of processes, I'd like to spend a little bit of time, we don't have a whole lot left, on Cover Oregon.
Yeah.
Because that's a process that, I think was kind of good in its vision, but the delivery system left a lot to be desired.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
And my wife had a great deal of difficulty trying to get registered under that, because people that they said, Cover Oregon said, oh, you need to talk to these people,
Right.
would sign her up for things and tell her, okay, this is how much it's going to cost, but then it turned out, no, they were wrong. And these are the people that Cover Oregon was sending us to.
That's right. There's absolutely, first of all, I'm not an apologist for the folks that actually made that decision. I wasn't there when that happened. And if I'm elected, I'll make sure that something like that doesn't happen again, because when I was mayor and on the school board, and to some degree when I worked for Governor Kulingoski as a senior policy advisor, I was involved in certain types of oversight, and I understand the value of asking the right question at the right time. And I'm not afraid to be the guy in the room that says, wait a minute, you guys are saying this and you guys are saying that. Is everybody talking to each other? I'm not afraid to ask the dumb question. And I believe that we absolutely have to hold the decision makers accountable. We have to actually hold Oracle accountable. I'm surprised, because as a person who owns a small business and believes that small businesses are the backbone of America, I'm surprised that Oracle as a business would be content with allowing a customer to be treated this way. I mean, for their reputation alone, I would expect them to actually want to fix the product. And again, I'm aware of the benefits in terms of, separate from Cover Oregon, there are more people on health care, more Medicaid people got signed up because of having to use the pen and pencil method.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we learn our lessons from this and never repeat it.
Well, having worked in data processing, I realized too that a lot of people would ask me what I do, and I said I'm a translator between the technical and non-technical. And I think that's a lot of what really was missing, because people would speak in tech and people didn't understand it.
Where I come from, that's called leadership.
Yes.
And, for good or for ill, when a skipper of a boat puts a boat on a rock, they fire the skipper. And I think that there needs to be some more accountability at very high levels in terms of making sure that that never happens again, because it isn't just money that was wasted. It's opportunities for health care that were wasted, which means that there are people, real Oregonians, that could have been helped that aren't going to, because that money was squandered away, and we just can't let that happen.
Well, I want to thank you, Paul, for coming in and having this discussion. I do want people to know that I had invited Kathy Goss to come on, not on this show, but a separate show where we do the same type of interview covering the same topics, but as yet she hasn't responded. Well, her campaign has not responded, and I've had several conversations with them. But I'm hoping that we will have this conversation, because I think people need to know how well the candidates know the subjects they're talking about, how they get their information, and how they make their decisions. I think those are important things for voters to know. So I'm hoping that she will come on at some point and we'll have that discussion. But again, Paul, thank you for coming in and sharing your view on these particular topics, which I think are important, and I think most voters would consider them important too.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and look forward to any future opportunities that you might invite me to. And I also hope that my opponent actually shows up and participates, because I think in the end, the voters are always best served when everybody has an opportunity to hear what different candidates seek to do and why they seek to do it. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And this has been a special edition of Valley View on the election. Thank you.